Have you ever heard the saying, the left wing and the right wing of politics are just two wings of the same bird? With a lot going on in this world at the moment, I've actually been spending some time thinking about opposites. I know, isn't that a weird thing to kind of look into? However, I want to talk about, I guess another way of saying it, dichotomies. Now, what is a dichotomy? How I see it as two opposing things, opposites that kind of convey one meaning onto the other. So for example, we have light versus dark, good versus evil, order, chaos. You get the picture. It's like, why does this matter? Well, people like Plato have contrasted ideas similar to what I'm discussing. We've got the realm of forms and the realm of appearances, basically saying that there's things hidden behind the shadow. You know, what we think is there is not actually there versus what we see in everyday life. I feel like when we use language needs to be three parts, and this is what I like talking about when I do speech pathology. All communication really entails three things: naturalness, efficiency, and effectiveness. I feel like if you can do those three things, you can communicate pretty well. We know that if we're playing a game like a two-person game where one person's blindfolded and they have an origami piece of paper in front of them, and the person behind them has to tell instructions to them how to form the origami. If I was telling someone to fold it on the transverse plane and then flip it in the top left corner, that kind of language literally makes sense because I'm talking about what plane they should orientate the paper. But if someone doesn't know what that is, I'm actually being ineffective in communicating to them, rather than saying fold it towards your belly or whatever the instruction is required to do. That is more effective and I guess in turn more efficient and more natural to the understand person, the person that understands. Lol. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a perfect speaker. It's just a theory on how I believe language should be broken down into three parts. The only issue with communication though is we seem to categorize things into massive opposites, like war and peace, or light and dark, left wing or right wing. And the only problem with that is we have to orientate ourselves binarily, if that's even a word. You're either a 1 or a 0. But in reality, it seems like it's a spectrum, right? You know, if I said I'm a good person, well, how good am I? I know I'm not bad. If we substitute 0 as bad and 1 as good, am I a 1 or am I a 0? Well, I know that I'm not perfect, therefore I'm not probably a complete 1, but I know I'm not evil, therefore I'm not a complete 0, but I know I've hurt myself and others before. So that example on its own implies that there's a spectrum. And you might be saying, well, why does that matter? Well, it actually does matter a lot, and it's used a lot, I guess, politically and in everyday language to describe the world around us. I guess there's a phenomenon called black and white thinking, and you can probably hear it from the Sith in Star Wars. Only the Sith deals in absolutes.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Do we deal in absolutes? Well, some people do, and I guess that's called black and white thinking. I was meeting with a friend and he gave me this question that really shook me, and it kind of led me on this path, and I'll read it to you guys. If there is a conception of absolute good, how do you structure a society around that, avoiding the implications of utilitarianism? Now, if there is a conception of absolute good, meaning 1, how do you structure a society? Well, it stems from more than just the individual now, it's going towards large groups. So how can you hold large groups responsible for ideas and what they deem as one thing or the other? The main issue that I find here in politics is we talk about two main things. These two things in leadership would be outcomes versus ideals. Now, these two ideas juxtapose each other, I believe, because outcomes is all about getting things done, and ideals is about, I guess, perfection. It's the one we're talking about. If you wanted to run a good society, you want to be idealistic and virtuous about that. But not to say that you want to run a bad society, you have to focus on outcomes. It's more that outcomes don't really work with ideals because, like we said, just because one thing's good and one thing's bad doesn't mean that reality will play it out as black and white. It's more spectrum, which goes on to the idea of the golden ratio or the golden average. I can't remember what it's called. It's the golden mean by Aristotle. It's the virtue continuum. So for example, we've got on the deficit side, corruption, and on the excess side, we have legalism. And in the golden mean, we have integrity. It seems as which, when we talk about language or when we talk about politics, we seem to juxtapose each thing and we struggle to meet in the middle because we know that no one leans, I guess, purely as a 1 or purely as a 0. There are some things, but not all things. So I think languages kind of set us up to juxtapose these ideas, which pigeonholes us into two sides of the room, us and them. But I feel like there's lots of common ground, and we do know that, but it requires language to get there. And unfortunately, I believe that language hasn't set us up for a place to succeed in us to actually convey the common ground. Now, in mathematics, we have zeros and ones, binary. You're either positive or you're negative. You're either true or you're false. So if it's possible that there is objective goodness out there, it seems that there's only two states. You could either be heading towards good or away from it. If you can't be perfect and you can't be true forms of evil, then you're only heading towards one or the other, which is the dichotomy of position, right? You're either heading one way or you're not heading the other way. Let's look at it as we've got black over here and white over here. We have true white, which can be represented as 1, and we have true dark or true black over here, which represents as 0. And there's a gradient. Now, if I said to you, how good are you? And you had to put yourself on a line, you'd be like, okay, I haven't done this, I haven't done that. I think I'm good, but I'm not here or there. And you put your pin, your dot on it. As you zoom in to see where you are on that number line, you find out that it keeps getting, the gradient increases, it increases, and you can't actually tell where you are on it. Because you know that to one way it's darker and to the other way it's white or lighter, but you can't actually quantify that. Hence why I think you can only get whiter or darker. There's no current state. You can't really measure the goodness that you are, if that makes sense. And I guess philosophically, this is what I mean by agnosticism. It's like you cannot actually be on the boundary. Like you can't believe in God or not believe in God, which kind of defeats my idea that you're either a 1 or a 0. But technically that's the case. You're either 1 or a 0, or you're heading towards 1 or heading towards 0. Theoretically, you cannot define where you are on a stated line because the line could be zoomed in and you could still quantify the infinite amount of that thing within the other thing. For example, there's infinity between 0 and 1, 0 here and 1, all right? And you want to count from 0 towards 1. How can you start that? So you go 0.01, or you can probably even go before that. You can probably go 0.001, but then it's an infinite amount. You could be 0.0000 infinite, but you know there's going to be a 1, right? In the same way with that color spectrum of good and evil, we know that 1's here and 0's here, but when we say that we put ourselves on the line, we actually don't know what quantifiable amount of goodness we are. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm going crazy. And this is the issue, right? We've got, Cain and Abel, order and chaos. We either are order or chaos. But in reality, we're either heading towards order or heading away from order. I feel like there's an action in progress-ness to the idea that I'm trying to explain here. Hence why language is kind of flawed in that way, is because we can't identify where we lie in any certain way. Hence why distraction and contentment are probably the biggest killers in motivation in practice, right? I'm either becoming better at recording videos and talking to you guys, or I'm becoming worse. There's no I'm actually sat right now. And you guys are probably like, oh my gosh, Lewis just figured out that you can either get better or worse. But to me, you're either one or the other. Does that make sense? I think intention is way more important than the outcome. Now, I'm saying that from a place that I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it seems as if I intend to do good, I intend to orientate myself to what is utmost good and heading away from evil as much as I can, that would probably propose a net good for myself and others. If you believe in God and Jesus is the ultimate example of that goodness, or any figure that you want to orientate yourself to, there has to be the most good thing you can look up to, right? If I wanted to head toward goodness, because I don't know where I sit on that spectrum of good and evil, what is that number one? What is that thing at the end of the line that's absolutely good? And I feel like that is what people orientate themselves towards. Now, I don't want to be like a Jordan Peterson where I say, what does it actually mean to believe in God? Or what does it actually mean to put your faith in something? He would argue, similar to me, is that you have to orientate yourself to goodness and keep pursuing that, and it's impossible to get there. It all depends on what is good. Jesus claims to be the perfect perfection, and we can't do that. Literally, I know that because I've failed myself and others. But the Bible says if you put faith in him, the ultimate goodness or perfection, perfection comes to you. Because the only way to get into heaven or into relationship with perfection is to be perfect. And I'm not perfect, but I'm aspiring to be perfect. But at the end of the day, I can't be. I can't be perfect. And we all know that. So I guess that's the cheat code. Have perfection come to you, still aspire to be like perfection, which is Jesus, and then you move forward. I guess it's more of a complicated virtue ethics thing, but that's how I look at dichotomies of you're either heading towards or away. And I feel like language doesn't really facilitate the towards or away part. It's more you're either one or the other, but it's more of a spectrum, not a black and white rigid thinking. Anyway, this video is wild. I haven't actually planned anything, and I'm so sorry if it makes no sense, but I hope it can get you thinking about the way you look at reality. Comment down below if you want to flesh this out. I think I'm going to do another video to kind of unpack my thoughts, but this is more of a rant. Stay cool.